blurb here from this book, which I think is awesome. It says, the leader who fails to face her darkness or his darkness must live with fear and hypocrisy. The result will be a defensiveness that places saving face and controlling others as higher goods than blessing others and doing good work. Here's the thing that I've been coming to understand. We have to get away from this perfectionistic view of Christianity, where if I'm not perfect, then I'm no good. I just nothing. That is a lie. You will never be perfect. And those perfectionist tendencies need to be crucified and say, God, I'm a mess, but bless this mess and use me. God, I am willing, I'll go. We have to be, you might even be saying today, I'm not as on fire as I should be. God will use you. I remember when I was growing up in youth group, and the kids are jumping around and they're dancing and they're raising their hands. Man, I was just so clammed up, so closed up. Maybe that's you. God wants to break you free. But it's all in taking a step, It's all in taking a step in obedience to see how God can use you and not believing the lie the devil tells us that we're a failure because you fall short. He keeps reminding us of all those things. When God is saying, you have all of the kingdom of heaven, all the power of supernatural life inside of you ready to be unleashed if you'll just bring your little loaves and fishes. Let me multiply them. It's all you got to do. Just bring those loaves and fishes. And stop disqualifying ourselves, living in condemnation and all that stuff. This guy here, his name's Rob Schellert. Rob Schellert is, when I was a youth pastor in a Foursquare church in Northwest New Jersey, when I met Rob, he had no hair. He was all shaved, and he kind of hunched over, and his eyes kind of bugged out, and he kind of looked like Uncle Fester, remember from the Addams Family? Yeah, kind of like that. Kind of had that vibe going. He always wore all black, okay? And he was, very quiet, never talked. He had 2 hearing aids. He's mostly completely deaf. Even with the hearing aids, he only hears half of what I say. And that's who Rob was. He was an introverted, very quiet, shy guy. He was in college, but not doing well, doing really bad grade-wise. He was working at Staples, and his life just wasn't going anywhere. And I was preaching one Sunday, and he came up to me afterwards, and he said, Pastor Juan, could I serve? Could I help out in the youth group? And I was like, awesome, man, that would be great. I need help. And so he began to come and serve week after week. He would come and do anything that needed to be done. He'd blow leaves in the parking lot. He'd help me set up the room. Anything that he'd run errands. He never said, oh, no, I can't do that. That's beneath me. He did anything. He was a man that was just, his heart was burning. He had to get in the mix. He had to get in the fire. He had to follow God. Was he the most stupendous, young Republican American, like, hey, that's the born leader, everybody put in the yearbook? No, he's the opposite of that. But he was a man after God's own heart. Well, Rob ended up, I asked him to give his testimony and share for one of the youth group meetings. And he was terrified, and he was afraid. And he said, Juan, if I tell them about the real me, nobody's going to like me. Because Rob had been a person who had been depressed and suicidal. Just, been the kind of person that he felt nobody would want to be around. Well, he gave that message because I twisted his arm enough, and he did incredible. I mean, every eye in that room, every ear was just watching and listening, and God was moving. And it turned out that drew all those kids to him, and he began to be a leader. They began to look to him. Well, we took him on a trip to Uganda, Africa. We took a group of like 20 people to do a mission trip with Foursquare. And here's Rob, how he usually looked with no hair. And as you can see, he had a blast. God used him, and it was just the best. It was the best. If you haven't been on a mission trip, you better go. It's just, you're missing out. But on the way there, we stopped in London, England, because we had a layover. I know it was a long layover, like half a day, so we thought, well, who wants to sit in the airport? Let's go walk around London, see the sights. So we're all like zombies, you don't sleep, and you feel like it's the middle of the night, and we're walking around. And my wife, Tracy, she prophetically said to Rob while we're walking on the street, God, Rob, wouldn't it be wild if God called you to these underground subcultures, these punk rockers and heavy metal heads and all the things you're into here in London? Wouldn't that be wild, like a missionary? And he said, oh, yeah, well, that never happened, you know. I mean, I like New York and New Jersey, and that's where I think I'm supposed to be. But he came back from this mission trip, and he was he just kept getting fired up. You know, things kept happening, and God's using him to speak to, Africans halfway around the world. And so he comes back, and he enlisted in a discipleship training school up in Canada. He began to go, and he just fill up on God, and they began to train him and disciple him even more. And he went on mission trips from that team to like the Middle East and China, and so he had these wild experiences. And he came back, and he started a Bible study in his home, and all these kids kept coming. They played video games with him for hours, and then they worship on their face, and they just press into God and study the Bible. And God was raising Rob up. Well, here's Rob today. He's married. This is his bride. He just got married recently. Rob is now a full-time urban missionary pastor in London, England. He started a church. He was part of a church. He was pastoring a church called the Glorious Undead, which was taking a quote from a C.S. Lewis book, I think. And God was using him to reach out to these subcultures. He would go to these heavy metal clubs and punk rock clubs where people were Satanists and witchcraft. I mean, the darkest, dark places. And Rob would go in there alone. And he would sit at the bar with them and just start to talk. And they'd start to, become friends. He'd say, hey, why don't you come to my house? And they would have Bible studies at his house. And they'd play video games. They'd eat and they'd hang out. And he began to disciple them and build the church, the most least likely people. And now he's pastoring this church. He's planted a brand new work called the Bridge Collective. And he's gathering artists and musicians and all this, young people. In fact, I'll let you see some of them. Here's some of the church people right here in his church. This is on the beach in London. It's a bunch of small rocks, really. And this is for a beach baptism that they did. You have to have a lot of guts to be baptized in the ocean there because it's cold. I've done a baptism in Ireland, and it was brutal. The waves are crashing in, and here he is baptizing. They baptized multiple people in the ocean there in London. So God called him from who he was to impact really Europe. He's run